As soon as I accepted where I was at, I was able to make a path forward for myself and actually utilize the skills that I had to find a way back out. I know what it's like to be at the bottom of that space. Day to day mothering is hard enough. And then you add in those other layers of loss of support and anxiety or depression or what have you, and it's even tougher.
Welcome to Mothering from Within, the podcast where we dive into the heart of parenting during those magical yet challenging first few years. I'm Kaili Ets, a mama of two, a pediatric occupational therapist, and your guide on this beautiful journey of motherhood. Every week, we explore the wonders and hurdles of motherhood with curiosity, we gain clarity around our babies, and find the courage to trust our instincts. If you are a mama who wants to do motherhood your way, confidently, courageously, authentically, then you are in the right place. So grab a cup of tea, tuck those little ones in for a nap, or bring them along for the ride. It's time to get curious, gain clarity, and unleash your courage to do motherhood your way. A gentle disclaimer. Please do not consider anything discussed on this podcast by myself or any guest of the podcast to be medical advice. The information is provided for educational purposes only and does not take the place of your own medical or healthcare provider. Well, hello and welcome. I am so excited to have a guest expert, Dacia. Hopefully I am saying that right.
You've nailed it.
Dacia lives in New Zealand with her husband and 3 kids, and she is also an occupational therapist. She specializes in mental health. And she, of course, has had a lot of lived experience as a mama. And Dacia's really invested in supporting other moms with self-regulation and really connecting with their identity as more than a mama. So we are going to dive in. Welcome, Dacia. Nice to have you with us today.
Thanks for having me. It's so exciting. I love every opportunity to talk about this whole area because it's such a needed area of support.
I totally agree. It's needed and it's not necessarily talked about a lot. So I'm so excited for this conversation. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how you sort of even started working with moms and specifically around this identity piece and like the postnatal anxiety and like really bringing more mindfulness and self-care into their lives. I know that often we always have a story that led us to where we are. So we would love to hear what that story is.
You're exactly right. Exactly right. I had kids, I guess, later than some people do. I think I was 32 or 31 when I started having kids. And so I had a long professional career before that. And I was always very high achieving, really spending a lot of energy in my work identity and in developing my work. And being an occupational therapist and working with people, especially vulnerable people under like often a mental health care, you put a lot of emotional investment into your work by nature. And so a lot of my identity was wrapped up in my work as an occupational therapy and specifically in the types of work that I was doing at that time. And so I kind of was one of those all in kind of people. I was all in my work, I was all in my hobbies, and everything was just really full on. And then I had a child, and no one told me that that was going to change my life. I mean, they do, but not in the way I expected. I just didn't expect it to radically shift my perspective, my priorities, my values even, and my goals for the future. I just never anticipated that. And so honestly, it just really rocked my world. I really struggled with understanding how to formulate that sort of new identity as a mom because like most things before that, I was all in on being a mom. And everything I thought was going to be a certain way wasn't that way. My first child was a non-sleeper. She slept for 15 minutes at a time all night. And so at a physical level, I was significantly depleted. which made that journey harder. I had significant anxiety after having her, and she was born sort of right before COVID. COVID kind of all hit
Mm.
around her first birthday. And so everything that I had found up until that point as a coping mechanism, as a safe space, as a community support was gone overnight, essentially. And then I had another baby
Of course.
right on the back of the first baby. And don't get me wrong, I had such beautiful moments as a mom, and there was so much I loved about it deeply. And at the same time, it really just shifted my whole world. And having that second baby during COVID, when there was no support available from the beginning, just spiraled things for me and made it harder. Had I was feeling really low after having him. I was really struggling to find joy. I just felt really empty and sort of lacking in purpose. And obviously, still, I had two babies. They were both breastfeeding, they were 19 months apart. Neither one was sleeping. I was home alone all day, every day. Like it was just a tornado of variables all together, and it took me a long time to name that what I was experiencing was postnatal depression. And when I finally figured that out, I thought, "Oh my gosh, how did I not know this? I'm a mental health professional. I know what to look for." And yet finding enough mental clarity in that space was really difficult. And what really triggered that awareness for me was that I was in some online communities and asking for support about this or that. And someone said, "Hey, you know what? You might actually be depressed. And it's okay that you're like that right now. Like, you can accept that that's where you're at right now and move forward from there." And that's what I needed. I needed someone to just say, "This is what might be happening for you, and that's where you're at. You can accept that." Because what I was doing was sort of trying to conquer it, trying to combat this feeling of joylessness and this feeling of overwhelm with anything I could, trying to figure out, why do I feel this way? I shouldn't feel this way, really judging where I was at rather than accepting it. And as soon as I accepted where I was at, I was able to make a path forward for myself and actually utilize the skills that I had to find a way back out. So that's kind of where this whole thing I'm doing now sort of came out of. Was I know what it's like to be at the bottom of that space. Day-to-day mothering is hard enough, and then you add in those other layers of loss of support and anxiety or depression or what have you, and it's even tougher. And I found a way to create a path forward for myself, which included everything that I offer to moms. It included just really validating my nervous system experience, understanding why I felt so overwhelmed, finding like some sensory strategies to support myself. Like being at home with two babies all day is a significant shift in your sensory experience and exposure than you would otherwise have as an adult in the world.
Yeah, totally.
I wasn't sort of giving
Mhm.
that the recognition that it deserved despite being an OT. And then really looking at trying to get my to know myself again, exploring my values now that I had these two little people to care for, exploring my strengths and my interests, and just integrating all of that to come up with this new identity that felt like this transformation of me as a mom. Still me before, but not, but different. And once I went through that process, I I felt confident. I felt like I could look for opportunities outside of the house that helped me feel fulfilled. I felt like I could focus my energy in the house in a way that helped me feel in control of what I could control, that helped me feel grounded, that helped me regulate when dealing, with the chaos that can come with having little kids around. And I just felt, yeah, like just this whole new person with this sense of purpose. And so now I've kind of had some space. I've had another baby. So I've got three now.
Because why stop? You're already in that chaos.
Why stop? That is exactly right. You're just rolling with things at that point. And there's so many lessons my third one has taught me, but that's another story. So anyway, now I've had this third baby and I've had some time kind of processing my journey as a mom and trying it on and see how it feels and going out in the world with that and this, that, and the other. And now I feel like, all right, I'm ready to take this learning I've had, this lived experience, this training, and this self-development that I've done and put it together in a way that I
Mm-hmm.
know other moms need. And I very much needed not only that structure and that knowledge, but I needed
Mm-hmm.
someone to be there with me, to help me through it and prompt me and just say, "Hey, you got this. You can do it." Yeah, so that's kind of where it all comes from.
Yeah, and I think you touched on a lot of different things there. I think one of the biggest takeaways from that story is that it is so relatable, right? All of us, and I'm speaking for all moms, but I feel like we've all experienced that to some degree of feeling like we are almost out of control in motherhood and we just don't know how to climb out of the mess, out of the chaos, out of the overwhelm, out of the stress, out of the worry, all of the things. I love that that person commented on your post because talking about how actually motherhood is really hard and it is way harder than anybody ever talks about when you're pregnant. And it's okay for it to be hard. And I think that brings up this idea of matrescence where moms are actually born. You are reborn as a mom when your first baby is born. And so you have a huge learning curve that you have to tackle because everything is new, everything is changed. And that initially does send your brain, your primitive brain, into like, whoa, I'm in stress mode because I don't
Yeah.
know what's going on anymore. And so I think that that's so important to bring light to the fact that, okay, you might have postpartum anxiety or depression, and that's totally normal. And what does that look like, right? It might not be full-blown anxiety or full-blown what we would kind of consider depression or something before we had kids. It looks different. But then also that nervous system regulation, and you touched a little bit on that sensory overwhelm. And that's something that is not talked about a lot. There is sensory overwhelm. I, for sure, had that feeling of being touched out. Like, please just don't touch me anymore. Don't come near me. Like, just get off.
Oh, yeah.
Then there's also the auditory overwhelm and the smells and so many different things. And you're not doing the same coping mechanisms, like you mentioned, that you might have been doing pre-kids. So like you're not necessarily going out to the gym and like lifting your weights. Maybe you're lifting your babies,
Yeah, yeah.
but it's not the same, right? And so you don't have that reprieve of going somewhere, just mentally kind of releasing everything while you're doing your workout, for example, right? Because you've got these little ones always attached or around.
Oh,
So I think that's so important to like just bring to awareness, because as mamas, we're so focused on, baby sleep and baby reflux and how do I do this? And oh my gosh, now we're introducing solids and we're focused on that day-to-day mothering that it's so easy to lose sight of who we are, who we were, what we liked about that person, what we actually enjoy in life, all of these things. And that is part of what's leading to the nervous system sort of dysregulation and the anxiety and the depression, because you're just not actually taking care of yourself at all. It's like bottom of the list.
bottom of the list.
Which is something, I get it. Motherhood and mothering takes so much time and energy. And you're exhausted and you're depleted by the end of the day. And the thought of doing something for yourself is like, no, I can't even fathom what that would be. Or scrape up enough energy from the floor.
It becomes another pressure.
Exactly. If you are ready to take a courageous step towards doing motherhood your way, the Mothering from Within Collective is waiting with open arms to help you get curious about your parenting values, tune into your mama instincts, gain clarity about baby sleep, development, reflux, and more so that you can be the confident supermom you have always dreamed of. Visit the link in the show notes to learn more about the collective and how we can walk this beautiful path together. Yeah. Well, it's like a to-do, right? On your to-do list. Another
Yep.
thing you need to check off. You're like, oh, right? Like one more thing. I don't want one more thing.
That's exactly right.
I just want to crawl under the covers and never come out.
I think you've hit onto something there that's really important, which is that it's not just about the skills and the shifts and the change, but there's a mindset piece
Mhm.
too. Because even if you know that I need to spend time outside or I need to take time for myself, but you can't have the same expectations, right? And you have to totally reframe how you consider those skills in your life, what you consider self-care to be, how you can integrate that throughout your day rather than, oh, I just really want to get back to the gym and I'm so frustrated that I can't. And holding on so tightly to that goal and that expectation only spirals that frustration and dysregulation. And so, working really hard on your mindset so that you can think about it differently, meet your needs, but maybe in a different way, and be open to that sort of change is a tough process.
Yeah. So can you give us some like tips or, what are some strategies that you kind of focus on when you first start working with moms? And it could be strategies for the mindset piece or even like how do they make time or how do they find just a little bit of joy for their day, right? Because I think that's the other piece is that sometimes our day is just so mundane because we're like changing the diapers and which breast did I feed on and all of the things that you're also losing sight of what actually makes you happy in the first place.
Yep, definitely. I think really simplifying things. I talked about goals and expectations and all of that. So, for example, nobody's gonna have a clean house once you have kids. Like, for 5 minutes, you will, okay? And if you expect to have a clean house and you're always chasing kids around, picking up this and that, you will be endlessly frustrated, and you'll be expending all this energy on something that is unreasonable, actually, and unrealistic. And so, accepting part of having kids is having a messy house. And you find weird stuff in weird places, and that's just part of being a mom and having kids. So, if you're a person that needs to have space to feel calm and you need to have, neatness and organization, you can still do that, but not in your whole house. So, finding little niches within your day or within your home where you can have that. So my one of my niches is my spice rack. My spices are impeccable. They're in little glass containers. They're labeled. They're in alphabetical order. They are organized as much as they can be organized, and the kids aren't going to be anywhere near them, so they're protected. And whenever I feel like I'm gonna scream and throw everybody's toys everywhere and get them all out of the house and bury them outside because I'm so sick of looking at them, I go to my spices and I'm like, yes, I feel good. This is amazing. This is an amazing ice rack and it makes me feel calm.
Nice. I love that.
So, just really breaking it down and finding a space and a way where you can get your needs met and feel in control, because you can't control your kids. You
Mhm.
can't control the mess. You can't control when they're going through developmental leaps and their play schemas mean that they're throwing things, off the deck and dumping out containers of stuff everywhere. That's just part of their development. It's
Mhm.
part of having kids. So finding spaces where you can feel some sense of control
Mhm.
and some sense of getting your sensory needs met is really key, I think.
Yeah. I love that. And I think it's great that you brought up the idea of just like, just accept the messy house because I think this is something that a lot of overwhelm and stress happens because you feel like you have to cook the dinners, you have to do the laundry, you have to put away the toys, you have to make your house clean, and you have to do all of that while your baby naps.
Yeah.
And that also is unrealistic because actually that's when you should just be resting or doing something that you love
Hmm.
to just bring back some of that I'm taking care of myself right now.
Yeah.
Whether that's for 15 minutes, whether that's for 2 hours, it doesn't matter. just find something that will bring you just a little bit of joy, like looking at your spice rack.
Yes. Yeah, I'll take it.
I love that example. Okay, so let's talk a little bit. So I love this idea of having a space or a spot in your house that you can kind of have some control over. What does it look like? Clutter free, it's nice and neat, whatever brings you joy in that regard. Um, can you talk to us a little bit more about how we can cope with some of the sensory overwhelm or that nervous system dysregulations? I feel like sometimes that overwhelm gets so high that looking at the spice rack isn't going to cut it. Any other strategies that, like, maybe it's like embodiment strategies or taking a break and going outside or something that you sort of tend to recommend or you find yourself recommending a lot to the moms that you work with?
Yeah, yeah, you're exactly right. I think addressing that nervous system has to come first. Um, and self-awareness is probably the most important initial piece. It's just recognizing that for what it is, recognizing I'm not actually that mad that my child did whatever. What is really happening is that my brain is completely overloaded with input and I cannot function and I can't communicate and I need a break. So recognizing that for what it is allows you to then take space for yourself, whatever that looks like for you. And it doesn't have to be, going on a 30-minute walk. It can be stepping outside for 3 minutes and taking
Mhm.
3 deep breaths. For me, what I find useful is really tuning in to one of my senses. So if I'm starting to feel that bubbling sense of loss of control, and feeling that dysregulation, and I know, hey, this is actually because there's 100 noises around me, and people are climbing on me, and I'm hungry, and there's a lot happening in my body. I need a reset. So for me, I'll go outside if I can, and just breathe in the air. Or I'll just go look at my garden and just really tune into what I can see and notice, the little ladybirds crawling on the leaf or something. Um, or I'll, make an ice water and just really tune into the
Mhm.
cold feeling of the ice water as I take a drink, knowing that I'm taking care of my body when I do that. But just a 3-minute sort of zoom in on one piece of sensory input that you find calming, and you find grounding can be just enough space for your body to resettle enough that you can move forward.
I love that. So important to let moms know and to bring awareness of the fact that that is quote unquote self-care. I hate that term, but
Yeah.
um, that taking care of yourself, that prioritizing yourself, prioritizing your nervous system, prioritizing your regulation in the moment,
Mhm.
it doesn't have to take long and it doesn't have to be expensive and it doesn't have to be extravagant. Like, you don't have to go and draw yourself a bath. Like, that's one of the ones that I feel like I always see on the self-care list. And
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yep.
actually, you know what? I hate baths.
Mhm.
So that is not a good self-care activity for me, right? But what I do love to do is do my nails. And so that's
Mhm.
something that I can do. I love that little, like, just go outside, take 3 deep breaths, and that is enough to just whew,
Mhm.
ground you again. Better yet, if you can do that barefoot on the grass.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And it's just recognizing that because what we do is we push ourselves, we push ourselves, we push ourselves. And when we get into that space, that chaos, one, we're generating more chaos for our kids because they're feeding off of our internal chaos. And I think recognizing that helps prioritize the importance of it. And the other thing is when you're in that state of chaos, you're much more likely to make a mistake, to overreact, to, mess up, have an accident. Like there's just so much more things that can go wrong. You're less effective when you're working in that space. So, I hear this all the time too. I've got no time. I've got no time. And actually, it's like you can't afford to not take space for yourself because that ultimately will give you more time because you'll be more effective in the time that you have because you're more organized.
100%. And I think that's one of these things that before kids or like even after kids, when we're at work, we do prioritize taking breaks because we realize that the mental load is just too much. You can't work 8 hours in a day without a break. Like you're going to drive yourself crazy. And eventually at the end of the day, you're not actually going to be thinking clearly. And you don't have kids running around and screaming in your ears and touching you all the time, right? But at work, just that pure mental load is enough to throw you over the edge. And so we prioritize taking breaks during the workday.
Exactly.
But for some reason, we don't take those strategies and that idea and put it into our day as mothers with children, with this job of mothering. We don't take those breaks. And then we wonder why we lose our patience and why we snap at our husbands and why we do all of the things or yell at our kids when that's like not what we want to be doing as a parent. And that's part of where I think those parenting values and then your strengths come into play. So I would love to touch a little bit more on intertwining those two, because I think that's so important to know what are your values so that when you're out of alignment with those values, that can be a signal also of like, whoa, got to take a step back, got to take a break. Thank you so much. I am so honored that you agreed to be on this podcast and chat with me today. I loved this conversation. I think this conversation is going to hit home for a lot of moms, and they're going to feel validated, and they are going to also be able to take a deep breath in and let it out and just feel that stress and overwhelm sort of melt away, because it's almost like you've now given them permission to just be whoever and wherever they are right now, which is so important and something that we don't do enough of. Thanks for joining us today on Mothering from Within. If today's chat sparked something inside of you to explore your motherhood journey deeper, the Mothering from Within Collective is waiting with open arms. This program offers an intimate, high-touch coaching journey designed to empower you with the confidence and clarity to embrace motherhood on your terms, free from guilt. Get curious about your parenting values, gain clarity on your baby's sleep, development, and more, with comprehensive courses, one-to-one support, group Q&As, and a nurturing community. This is your invitation to join a community of mamas doing it all their own way, supported, seen, and held. Visit the link in the show notes to learn more about the collective and how we can walk this beautiful path together. Until next time, stay curious, embrace clarity, and let your courage shine.